economic, personal, social. So it's an all-encompassing. Obviously, for a woman, you need political rights to be able to express yourself. Within the society, you need to be recognized. In your personal space, you crave and seek recognition, and so on. And how do we get about to a space where a woman has absolutely same rights as her male counterpart? Again, only via education. There is no other way. Education is the key to emancipation. And this is something I believe in. I believe to be connected, but I strongly believe that there is only one way, and that is education. If there is any other way, we need to educate me about it. Of course, lived realities, lived experiences, which is again another, it's a huge field of education. When I say education, it doesn't mean going to school and getting education. But yeah, that of course really helps. But education of all kinds through which you become an educated person enough to understand where the society is discriminating against you and why you are facing this discrimination, and then wish to choose and do something about it. Next slide. So this is again very basic definition of first-rate feminism. All of you know that it is a Western concept. Grew, developed, got shaped in the US and in the UK in a huge manner. The fights were very basic. Fighting for equal rights within a marriage, fighting to have a job, fighting to own one's children. See, there was a time when the children were considered to be entirely the man's children. So the wife's family or the woman had no rights over it. So, fighting for those rights. Most of you would have read Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice. It's a very popular book. I'm sure all of you are familiar. Pride and Prejudice begins, the first line is that if you are a mother of 5 daughters, then you're thinking about the marriage. And the joke that I shared with my students is that if someone didn't tell me that this was happening in England, in the UK, I would have thought this is an Indian story. And the reason why Pride and Prejudice has been translated and made into several Bollywood films is because it is our story in so many ways. We can relate instantly. So the mother worrying about the daughter's marriages, and why? Because the mother, once the father dies, will lose out on her property. So all of us like to believe that Pride and Prejudice is about the love affair. Darcy and Emma Elizabeth and Darcy and their love and so on. Believe you me, it is not so much about love as it is about the property discussions, which are a core point in Jane Austen's novel. And why is she so obsessed with property? Because she knows that women do not have access to property. They only gain access to property via marriage. And once, in this household's case, once the father would die, remember that character who comes in Colin, what was his name, who wanted to get married to the eldest girl? I'm forgetting his name, but you all know who I'm talking about. The guy who comes because he's going to be the next person inheriting the property once the father dies. So therefore, this whole business of property rights. And you know very well that in India also property rights came to women much later. And a mini battle, if not a mega battle, a mini battle needed to be fought before the property rights were given to women. And even today, in local parlors, घरों में जो बातें होती हैं, तो बेटी की शादी कर देंगे और बेटे को मकान देंगे. इसमें कोई लड़ाई नहीं होती. कोई ये नहीं पूछता, कोई किसी लड़की ने पूछ लिया कि हमको मकान क्यों नहीं देंगे, तो वो तुमको बहुत ग्रीडी हो. तुमको तो ससुराल से मिलेगा. तुमको हम डाउरी दे देंगे. अलग अलग नाम भी निकाल के रखा हुआ है दुनिया भर का. बट वेरी ऑब्वियसली कुछ भी करेंगे, प्रॉपर्टी जो है वो एंसेस्ट्रल है, वो दादाजी का था, पापा का होगा, सब हो जाएगा. वेरी within the social models. I'm not talking about the Ika families like some of us might be privileged to have or whatever. The general perception and the general way of working. And stop me when you feel that, I'm not saying that I think this, I also need to be educated about the changes that have happened. Okay, then the biggest fight that was fought was the suffragette. Now this is a fight which we never fought. Surprise of surprises, we had voting rights from day one. And therefore, we didn't take our voting rights. This is a formulation that I have, and again, tell me if you agree or you disagree. I feel that when something is given to you on a platter, you don't appreciate it. When you have to struggle, when you have to fight, when you have to take out a morcha in order to get it, then maybe you understand the value. And maybe because we got it on a silver platter, so many things we got on a silver platter, we didn't value it. So while we knew we could vote, but we chose not to. Or we would vote as per what the men thought in the family. Whoever was the sort of, the dada or uncle or papaji or the घर का मालिक, वो कहते थे इस पार्टी को डाल दो, यही सबसे अच्छा आजकल हो। हम सोचेंगे भी नहीं जाकर वहाँ वोट देकर आए। वही हमने लड़ाई करी सफरगेट के लिए, मिल गया, उसकी भी इज्जत नहीं। Second wave feminism, this is a very unclear phase of feminism, so to say. It was almost a follow-up, as it were, from the first wave feminism. The only thing which I thought, from the 60s to the 80s, and this has really worked for me, when the personal becomes the political. I always thought this is a very, very interesting slogan, and a slogan which we have not lived by, but maybe we should adopt. Where everything that you do as a person, every act of it. So here, politics is not merely about what Modi is doing or what Rahul Gandhi or Kejriwal or XYZ, or what you keep seeing on Times Now or you shouting. Politics is the politics of your being, politics of who you are as a person. Every action of ours is political in that certain. So I think this particular coinage, that the personal for the first time becomes political. And how do I explain the personal becoming political? Well, there were several debates. And this is from, let us say, I'll give you examples from texts. All of you know Georgia, right? Have you taught literature? Do you know what her real name is? A, do you know it's a she? Yeah, so it's she is a she, and she is writing under the pseudonym of a male. Have you ever worried about it? Why did she do that?
In order to get published and be read.
In order to get published, it was important that you are a male. Why was it important to be a male to be published?
Because females cannot write.
Yeah.
Because during that time, females were not being considered as a serious writer. More importance was being given to male writers.
Absolutely. Even for education, women were not considered. They were educated as helpmeets of their husbands. What would they be taught? Silai bunai, how to dress up in a certain way, how to play the piano and to sing. And for the middle class, which was working, you had a Jane Eyre, you had, at some point of time there was a glorification that was talking about these middle class women who decided to break out of the aristocratic shackle. They didn't have aristocratic ancestors and they were working. But what was made out of that? Number one, ये बिचारी उनको नौकरी करके खाना पड़ता है. It wasn't something that was to be celebrated. It was something that you didn't have aristocratic roots and therefore you needed to go out there and work. Then what happens to the person who is working? She has to be of a certain stereotype. So those of you who have read Jane Eyre know exactly what I'm talking about. So she has to look a certain way, behave in a certain way, do her work in a certain way, etc., etc., etc. The minute you stray, you become a Bertha Mason. Remember there used to be a Bertha Mason in that house?
Yes.
The mad woman in that. Very interestingly, why was she mad? Can anyone tell me this?
Because she did not fit into the prescribed social order.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else? Why you thought Bertha Mason was mad? Does the text give us any sort of clue as to why they call her mad? She's called mad from the word go. Right from the beginning we know Bertha is mad. But do we know why she's mad? What is the medical condition? Is it ever mentioned?
I think more intellectual than means.
She was considered means she used to behave or she used to act, she used to speak in a way that was not expected from a woman to speak.
I will not agree with you there because she never spoke. Remember the conversation is that Bertha can't speak, she makes noises.
Yes, that
Bertha makes noises. Bertha, and what else does she do wrong? Bertha has black hair. Bertha is tall and big. She has instead of the prescribed color of hair, which was everybody was supposed to be blonde in a certain way, Bertha dared to have black hair. What else was wrong with Bertha? Nobody understood her language because technically she spoke some garbled tongue, which is never explained. So right from the outset we are told she's mad, she's mad, she's mad. Till the end of the text we never find out why she's mad. What we do find out, and that too on very, very close reading, not on the first reading. And I as a reader, when I read the book, I was so interested in Jane's love story, Jane and Rochester, I couldn't give a damn about what was happening to Bertha Mason in the book. Because see, again the important thing is, it is the narrator who carries it. It's the narrator who tells the story, it's the narrator who carries it. And the narrator makes a Devi out of one person and a villain out of the other person. So obviously who cares about the villain? We want to know what happens to the heroine. We want to have a good happy ending for the heroine. I'll tell you what was wrong with Bertha. Bertha belonged to West Indies. She was not a British citizen. Bertha belonged to West Indies, and why does West Indies feature in this whole discourse? West Indies is the area where most British aristocrats had their cultivation areas. That's where the money for the fancy houses and the aristocratic behavior, which Austen talks about so much, sipping of tea and ladies in the frilly clothes and so on and so forth. Obviously, we are talking money. Where is that money coming from? As far as we know, nobody goes to offices and works. Nobody does anything. We are told this is landed property. But landed property cannot just exist. Landed property also needs some kind of a, maintenance value has to be added. Some kind of money needs to be spent. So this money was coming from slave trade in West Indies, in Guyana, in all of these places. And the slaves were coming from where? Some shipped from India, some locals from there, and so on and so forth. There is only one line mentioned in Austen's book where she says that the owner, the father, goes to West Indies. This is one, which is a miss and you blink and you miss it because nobody is going to go and read it. In Mansfield Park I'm talking about. So Mansfield Park is again this huge mansion, very beautiful, and when you read Austen, the way she writes, that is the aspirational. That is how it should be. That is how the behavioral patterns should be. But that one line mentioned that the father goes to West Indies. What is the father doing from West Indies? He's torturing the slaves out there. He's a slave trader, and that's from where the money is coming. But obviously, in our sanitized world, we do not call him a slave trader. We call him a rich man, a rich aristocrat. So again, coming back to our friend Bertha Mason, what was wrong with Bertha Mason? Bertha is, we are told that Rochester didn't have money. He got money from Bertha. So what has Rochester done? He's gone and married a rich girl in the West of Indies, taken her money and property, brought her to England, shoved her up somewhere and said, "Ye to pagal hai. Ye hamari tarah dikhti nahi hai." If you read through the book, now that I'm saying all this, please go back and read and see if it is making sense. I would be very grateful if you can give me one instance where the text tells us what is the nature of a madness. हम किसी को पागल औरत बोले कुछ तो बोल प्रॉब्लम की? एक भी प्रॉब्लम नहीं है. प्रॉब्लम क्या है? What is being taught? She has black hair. Don't we all? But that is wrong. So I will elaborate all of this much later. But just in case I forget, so I'll say these were the stereotypes which were made. And the stereotypes went like this: all Indian women and all such women have incredible sexual appetites because they're buxom, because they look a certain way, unlike the very correct, perfect British woman. And that is a stereotype which held right through your entire colonial phase and literatures that follow. It will eventually, I will tie all these threads up when I do third world feminism. Why do we need a third world feminism? Because these were the areas which we thought was absolutely wrong. You cannot tell me I have all of these problems because my hair is black. It's just that I look different from you. But the whole idea was, because you are different means there is, so these stereotypes, you have to understand that colonization would not have happened if there was not a philosophy behind it. A philosophy which was supported by well-known scholars of that era. I will end this bit to get candid with this topic, but one more text I will cite, and maybe I'll be able to explain myself better. All of you would have read as children or as adults Robinson Crusoe. Yeah? Everybody is familiar with the story of Robinson Crusoe? Yeah? For those who did not say a yes, a two-liner story. So there is this British guy who goes off on a ship, and this was the first novel that was written. Daniel Defoe's novel, which was the first of its kind in terms of the genre. One of the first. You have Pamela, Defoe, almost around that same time when these novels were coming. So what happens to this guy? He goes in a ship, and then the ship gets wrecked. And then he's marooned on this island, where there is nothing and nobody. But what does our great British man do? He doesn't cry, he doesn't he doesn't want to swim and come back to Britain because he knows it is not possible. So this very rational, very sensible, very, everything that the British are supposed to do. Man, he puts out a calendar. In that calendar, he marks every day and date and lives like that for good 19 or 20 years. Every day being marked in the calendar. What else does he do? He keeps going back to the ship, and one day he carries something back, he makes a little hut. He gets some animals who had also survived, and he has a full-fledged British life, whatever of it is possible, in a marooned island world. In all of this once, he goes and saves a boy from being eaten by some cannibals, and he brings that boy home, whatever is home for him. And then this boy stays on with him, having a very peculiar name called Friday. Why is he called Friday? Because he came on a Friday. But interestingly, Robinson Crusoe never wants to know what Friday's real name is. In all the time that Friday lives with Crusoe, Friday is Friday. We never find out who Friday's parents are, what Friday's culture is, where does Friday come from. It's like your Chotu or your Nepali Bahadur. Grown-up person, usko Chotu. So, these questions, interestingly, are never asked. Defoe's book sells hugely and is proclaimed by everybody as the British novel. Something which totally reflects what is a British person who doesn't give in under such severe duress and manages to keep his culture intact till such time as he can come home to London. Remember, in all the novels, the home was always London. The validation had to come from London. So he has to go back to London. Meanwhile, what happens to Friday? He outlives his service, and when Crusoe is going back, Friday goes off service. When we try and understand this from our post-colonial perspective, these are the pointers that we see. That Friday, interestingly, doesn't need a name because Friday is not even conceived to be a human being in his own rights. Friday's culture is not at all important because the dominant culture and the dominant discourse happens to be Crusoe's. And that is to be celebrated. If we take it further back to Shakespeare, then you have Prospero and Caliban, and you have at one point of time when Caliban is abusing. And when you link it up with your post-colonial discourse, you say, well, Caliban has not been given a language, so he has learned to abuse in the master's language. So effectively, when we are doing post-colonial studies, don't think I'm digressing because post-colonial studies is directly linked to third world feminism. We have learned his master's voice or third mistress's voice, and perforce now we have to give back in that language. We do not have a choice. Never did we have a choice. This is again a very basic third wave feminism. It's a response to the backlash against initiatives and movements which were created by the second wave. Third wave feminism seeks to challenge or avoid what it deems the second wave's essentialist definitions of feminism. So the biggest critique that came was that how can you club women of all areas, places, nationalities, locations, caste, class, everything under one rubric and say women feminism. The concerns are varied, the concerns are exceedingly different, the concerns are not at all of the Western woman. Now, even as I say Western woman, I realize I am essentializing. Even the Western discourse is not a unified discourse. There are various, you're working on one area, you have varied discourses, but somewhere there is also a unison which has been possible because the whole idea, I realize I'm essentializing, but I will still continue to do so. Correct me if you think it's too much of a simplification, but I feel that the few strains which I can different genres of feminisms that exist within the Western world, the few strains which make sense or which can connect, one is to have a room of one's own, which very simply means is to have a space of one's own. One is to identify the genders, the differentiation between sex and gender, which is carried forward in a very scientific manner, particularly by the French feminists, who talk a lot about it. So you have the definitions of, and those definitions were that you're not born as something, but you made them. So those definitions were. There is also in the Western discourse a need where they're fighting for more evolved things. They're fighting for a space to write. They're fighting for a space to ideate. They're fighting for a space to exist where there is no physical male domination. Whereas in India, what are we fighting for? Dowry rape, female infanticide. Which one of us, now all of us are professionals here, which one of us can go back to our houses and say, excuse me, ये मेरा कमरा है, कोई इसमें पैर रखेगा तो my room of my own. I need my space. We all know this. We all come back to our workplaces and say, बिल्कुल टाइम नहीं मिलता है, कर नहीं पा रहे, काम जितना करना चाहिए उतना नहीं कर पा रहे. क्यों नहीं कर पा रहे? हमारा room of my own कहाँ पर? So these problem areas were articulated, and one realized that the fights were very different. While we are grateful that the Western feminists taught us, they gave us the basic understanding that that women needed to speak up for themselves, women needed space for themselves, women needed a happy environment for themselves. Questions were raised. What happened to Shakespeare's sister? If Shakespeare had had a sister, would her life be the same as Shakespeare's? Because she would have been muzzled and killed right from because she was a girl. So these concerns were raised. Those concerns are valid for us as well. But my argument is that while they raise those concerns and moved to the next step, we are still grappling with those concerns. We have not been moved. Therefore, when we talk about our feminism, if there is a concept of feminism, it has to be different from the rest of us. Are we on the same page till now? Yes. Everybody agrees? Okay, now this is, next one, what's this? Yeah, so the initial attempt in the, just read through this. This is Spivak's definition. Who are the ideologues of the so-called third world feminism? One of them is Gayatri Spivak, all of you are familiar with her. Most of us might not agree with many formulations of hers, but she's still a critic you cannot ignore. And Spivak is very relevant even today because she's ideating and talking and revising a lot of stuff which she herself has said, which I think is great coming from a scholar. That's what we should be doing. We can't get stuck with what we have said one day and that's it. So she's evolving. Here she makes very, very valid points. She says, neither with the Eastern nor with the Western bloc in the world system, in response to the seemingly new world order established after the Second World War, was not accompanied by a commensurate intellectual effort. The only idioms deployed for the nurturing of this nascent third world in the cultural field belong then to positions emerging from resistance within the supposedly old world order, anti-imperialism and or nationalism. Keywords, I should have underlined maybe, keywords being anti-imperialism, nationalism, and the one before that is I'm missing the word, but where you fight, so resistance. The key word to any movement, I would say, has to begin with resistance. Because if you don't resist, if you don't problematize, if you don't ideate and think about it, you will never move to step. Though Spivak, who has her origins in India, but has lived abroad most of her life, not to discount from her credibility as a critic, I would say what Spivak also enjoys maybe people, who are still operating within these spaces and not into it. At least Spivak want to articulate this. The minute you articulate resistance in the Indian context, you become a bad woman. A bad woman, a fallen woman, anything. A husband beater, anything. Yes. Another critic, she's teaching you, hers is a simple thing which you will understand. So third world is a term that both signifies and blurs the functioning of an economic, political, imaginary geography, able to unite vast and vastly differentiated areas of the world into a single underdeveloped territory. So the concept of the third world. Now this is very, very problematic. What is the third world? Can you all tell me? I know that we are a part of the third world, but who else is part of this development? Yeah. Yeah. Colonized, even America had been colonized, but declared its independence long back and then almost colonized Britain. The key word, economics. Your GDP and God knows what. So economics. And my argument is that the minute an economic differentiation or understanding starts to define your country, there is a major problem. A country cannot be defined by its economics. And I think I will digress here and talk about a philosopher whom all of you know and would have read, Tagore. I will talk a little about Tagore's nationalism here. I will go on later because the nationalist discourse was very important in this formulation of feminism, whatever. Tagore, where do you think Tagore stands on the nationalist debate? are constantly hearing terms like national, anti-national. हर मिनट किसी को एंटी-नेशनल का टैग ऐसे बांट देते हैं, तो हमें तो पता ही नहीं हम नेशनल है, एंटी-नेशनल है, पाकिस्तानी है, क्या है, सब तो hodgepodge हो गया है. But before it became so complex, before people started giving us report cards on our nationalism, what do you think? You've read it, and you know Tagore gave us Janagan. Also gave Bangladesh its national anthem, also supposedly, also gave Sri Lanka its national anthem. But what did he think about nationalism? Any idea? Anyone? I saw you so getting very excited when I said Tagore. Would you want to talk about it? Yeah? Okay.
Reference the point where the mind is clear.
Yes. In that reference, the same song, I think he has narrated about the national.
But then he's not really talking about one nation.
He's really talking about the world in a sense.
Yeah.
I would advise you, please, and do this as a reader. Read up on Tagore's nationalism. It will help you understand the current situation very well. Well, even if it comes as a surprise, Tagore was completely, totally, fully, unconditionally anti-concept of nationalism. He critiqued it endlessly. He said that a country such as ours, which is an extremely diverse country, we speak different languages, we have different cultural scenario, we have different, different kinds of people who have come into this country and settled down, so we can't even claim similar ancestry. We don't know who our ancestors really were. Then there has been intermarriage, somebody based here has gone and settled there, had children there, so on and so forth. Open culture. Now, in an open cultural scenario, he compared it with Europe. He said the problem of Europe is the same as the problem of India. Europe is several countries speaking different languages. We are one country speaking different languages. So if we solve our problem here, we can teach Europe how to solve their problem. Remember, Europe was forever fighting with each other. So Tagore said, India should be that light to the world, which will show the world how we can survive as, he didn't want to use the word nation, as a group of people who survive together, and we should become an example. So, and then he talked about Buddha, and he talked about, the exports from India, as he calls them. So, this is a huge export